Thank you very much, Bob. Appreciate it, and a big thank you to TT Club for initiating this project here. And over the past decade, there's been a lot of increases on industry initiatives aimed at improving safety and handling loss prevention in the industry. And I think there's a very good traction on these incidents. There's also been a lot of serious cases over the years, so it's extremely important. And I would just like to applaud that we have almost 500 people signed up to participate in this webinar, and that just goes to show that this is something that's very important, and that there is a support in the industry to address these things consolidated. The only wealth that increases by sharing is knowledge, and the fact that we're able to cooperate on these things is proof of that. So yeah, if I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, and there might be some repetition here in all the introductions, and it's not a new challenge. Every year there are companies that ship cargo, and then for various reasons it is not collected. There is substantial costs involved with this, both storage-wise and monetary-wise, and there's a lot of hidden costs involved with this also. And of course, COVID-19 has also played a significant delay in the supply chain, primarily due to workers not being able to perhaps work up to high speed or normal speed, I would rather say. And of course, the delayed shipments of dangerous goods adds another layer of concern on this. Yeah, can we have the next slide, please? Yeah, and these are the risks. Of course, we only talk about what has been published in the media, but I think for this particular vessel here, it was a type of dangerous goods that was declared as dulls or similar to that, according to the media outlets. Misdeclared cargoes is of course another concern, and if you don't know what cargo is actually in the container, or if it's rightly declared, then of course you have another layer of concern. And could we have the next link, please? Yeah. So now these days we are looking at the delayed shipping frequency, right? So you might have a usual transport time of 2 weeks, and you could be looking at maybe 6 to 8 weeks due to the congestion and the waiting times and so on and so forth. We also have a concern, we believe, is due to the higher temperatures in many ports. So, for example, I think the picture that was shown by Captain Brough in the beginning was actually due to nitric acid or something like that, and that is something that, of course, cannot stand for years and years in a warm port. So there are concerns about this, and what are the things that we need to consider is, of course, that we have to be proactive when we have a container that is congested in a port or that is stranded in a port. And what happens is actually that many times the recipient or the consignee disappears, and sometimes the manufacturer disappears. And then we have to consider that it's not just a mail correspondence. You have a container that's 6 or 12 meters long and has 20 to 30 tons of cargo. In many, many ports around the world, there are no disposal facilities for these kinds of things also. So you are in a situation where you have a container that you want to get rid of, and you are actually allowed, according to the terms and conditions, to dispose of it, but you might not be in a country where it's possible to dispose of the container. And then you come into another scenario where you then have to begin looking at shipping the container, and the shipping of the container might not be safe anymore. And you have to find a country or a state that has a disposal facility. So it's an extremely complex situation We also have to bear in mind that usually containers have a 1-year insurance coverage. So that means after 1 year, then the carrier and the terminal is stuck with the situation and has to solve it. There are, of course, the terms and conditions that have to be signed in the beginning of a shipment of a container, and I refer to COXA and Hæk-Visby, which are the usual and/or Hæk-Visby. So there are, shall we say, recovery principles, such as FIATA also leads on to. But one thing is the recovery, another thing is the practical concerns. So in practice, when we have these situations, it is more a problem that you have physically that you need to deal with. And next slide, please. Yeah, and there are many products that, according to the IMDG code, require stabilization. It's a big challenge for the accepting carriers to evaluate what the stabilization actually is. And we all know that products will deteriorate over time, and stabilization might not be effective over time. So what is it that you actually have to go in and do if you are a carrier that has long-standing cargoes that has not been collected? So the recommendation is, of course, that has also been alluded to, that there is a dialogue with the shipper, with the manufacturer, to find out what is it that we're actually dealing with here. And as we only have a 1-year insurance coverage, then it's very paramount that it's dealt with quickly. And we all know the length of email communication that we have sometimes. So one thing is putting a shipper and a consignee on notice, and then it sort of drags out, right? Then there's maybe an answer, then there's maybe not an answer, and so on and so forth. And the fact of the matter is that sometimes we have shelf companies that simply go away, and then they will jump up under another name somewhere. And that is what it makes it complicated to actually get hold of the responsible parties that have been involved in the shipment. It's also important to consider, since you only have a year, whether you need to get involved with a fire expert that can be helpful in determining what are the actual risks at this terminal due to the predominant temperatures that are at that terminal in that country. So these are the things that you need to do. You need to be relatively proactive, given the time span of a year. Begin the process with consignee shipper, begin the process with a fire expert, and so on and so forth. And already at that point, if it is a declared dangerous goods container, begin thinking about what are your disposal options when you get over a year and you're still not rid of it. Next slide, please. And yeah, this just goes to show that that one box of fertilizer can have a potential crisis effect. And we are shipping 25 million containers per year, and there's about 6,000 ships. So it is, each container that is a delay is actually causing distress, congestion, concern. And bear in mind, please, that one container stuck at a terminal also reduces the throughput of the terminal, so it aids in the congestion. Mike, which number slide is this, please?
Sorry, Uffe, I think this is slide 6.
Okay, very good, thanks. And of course, in this process here, we also have to consider the inland journey. So one thing is that the terminal is congested. If you then manage to get a hold of the party and actually get that party to pick up the container, there could also be an added long inland journey. So one thing is the sea congestion, another part is the land travel and the destination. Next slide, please. Yeah, and the situation we have now outside Long Beach and LA is that there is severe congestion. We are looking today at about 90 vessels, I think, waiting to get into Long Beach. So of course it is a concern that there is so much cargo that are awaiting transport to final destination. And next slide, please. Yeah, and then we have an incident at Chittagong here, where there's approximately 486 tons of dangerous goods, according to the Bangladesh correspondents that's stuck at that terminal. They've been lading for a long time, and what actually happens many times when there's congested cargo, then the cargo is put up for auction because that is the carrier's right to auction or destroy it. But it is in principle a risky business because these are products that have been stuck there for a while, and you need to be very careful about how you handle them. What is the end use for it? Are there considerations that you do need to take, and so on and so forth? And next slide, please. Yeah, and Maersk has also suggested that there is the stress and historic congestion and bottlenecks, and there's no end in sight right now. But of course, all parties of the supply chain are waiting, are aiding and doing their best to solve this situation. I would also like to say finally here, before I hand over to Mr. Auburn, that the industry has been working on a warehousing paper to address the incidents of Tianjin and Beirut, and this is coming up relatively soon. I think maybe not to promise anything, within 4 to 6 weeks, then it will be published. And this will help the warehousing part of it to inspect, to check, so on and so forth. And there is an intention that a new second part of that paper will be produced that will specifically address abandoned cargoes and procedures involving abandoned cargoes. So that is it from my side here, and with that I would kindly like to hand over to Mr. Auburn.